The great hall fell silent as Zixathera entered. Her forearms shook as she walked to the center of the room. The alien warrior had once been proud and strong. Now she looked broken. Her 3 eyes darted around the room, never staying in one place too long. 17 different alien species sat in the circular chamber. They had come from across the galaxy to hear her story. Each species had sent their best leaders and generals. They all wanted to know what happened on Kepler 442b. The Galactic Council had expected good news. The humans were new to space travel. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their technology was basic, compared to the great powers of the galaxy. When the hegemony decided to bring them into the galactic community, it should have been simple. The hegemony was the strongest military force in known space. They had conquered over 300 worlds. Their soldiers were the best trained and best equipped in the galaxy. When they wanted to add a new species to their empire, the process was always the same. Show overwhelming force. Demand surrender. Take control. It had worked every time for the past 2,000 years. Zixathera had been part of the Void Talon Regiment. They were elite soldiers, chosen from the best warriors of 12 different species. She had fought in 47 battles across 23 worlds. She had never seen her unit lose more than a few soldiers in any campaign. The mission briefing had been routine. Kepler 442b was a small human colony world. Intelligence reports said it had 8,000 civilians and only 200 military personnel. The humans had basic weapons and no orbital defenses. The hegemony would send 50,000 troops. It would be over in hours. "Tell us what happened," said Council Leader Mordeth. His voice was gentle but firm. "Start from the beginning." Zixathera's translator device hummed as she spoke. Her natural language was a series of clicks and whistles, but the machine turned her words into galactic standard. "We dropped from orbit at dawn," she began. 500 landing ships carrying the finest soldiers in the galaxy. Our scanners showed the human positions clearly. They had built simple defenses around their main settlement. Nothing that should have stopped us. She paused and touched one of her arms. There was a scar there, barely visible under her scaled skin. The humans knew we were coming. Our intelligence said they had no early warning systems, but they were ready. When our first ships landed, they were already in position. Admiral Krexta leaned forward in his seat. The old warrior commanded the Council's combined fleets. "Did they attack your landing zones?" "No," Zixathera said. "That was the first strange thing. They let us land, all of us. 50,000 soldiers, all our equipment, everything. They watched from their positions and did nothing." "They were afraid," suggested General Yiptal. "Primitive species often freeze when faced with superior force." Zixathera's 3 eyes focused on the general. For a moment, something like her old warrior spirit showed through. "No, they were not afraid. I have seen fear many times. This was something else." She closed her eyes and seemed to be remembering. "When we finished landing, my regiment was assigned to the northern approach. We were to advance on their main defensive line and demand surrender. Standard procedure. We had done this hundreds of times." The chamber was completely quiet now. Even the background hum of the air recycling system seemed muted. We advanced in formation. Perfect lines, weapons ready, showing our strength. The humans watched us come. They had maybe 50 soldiers in the northern section. "We had 5,000. What did they do?" asked Mordeth. They waited. And while they waited, other humans were moving. We could see them on our scanners. They were not running away. They were not hiding. They were moving the civilians. Zixathera's voice became quieter. I had been in many first contact situations. When civilians see a hegemony force, they panic. They run in all directions. Families get separated. Children cry. Adults beg for mercy. It is chaos, and chaos makes military operations easier. She shook her head slowly. The human civilians were calm. Families stayed together. They moved in organized groups to predetermined locations. Children helped elderly humans walk. Adults carried supplies and equipment. There was no crying, no begging, no panic. Admiral Krexta frowned. "Impossible. Untrained civilians cannot maintain discipline under pressure." "That is what we thought too," Zixathera said. "But we were wrong about many things." She walked to the center of the chamber. A holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of Kepler 442b. "This is what our intelligence told us about the colony," she said. The map showed a simple settlement with basic buildings and mining facilities. Agricultural domes, housing units, mining equipment, and a small spaceport. A typical frontier colony. The map changed, showing the same area but with different details. This is what we found when we got there. The simple settlement was gone. In its place was a complex defensive network. The agricultural domes had thick walls with weapon ports. The housing units were connected by underground tunnels. The mining equipment had been modified into weapons platforms. How long did this transformation take? Asked General Yiptal. According to our timeline analysis, they completed it in 18 hours, Zixthera said. From the moment our fleet entered the system until we landed, they turned their entire colony into a fortress. Murmurs filled the chamber. 18 hours was not enough time to build major defenses. They did not build it in 18 hours, Zixthera continued. They revealed it. The defenses were already there, hidden inside the normal colony structures. The agricultural domes had always been bunkers. The housing units had always been connected by tunnels. The mining equipment had always been designed to become weapons. She touched the holographic display, and it zoomed in on the human defensive positions. We approached their northern line. I was in the first rank, as befitted my status as a veteran warrior. When we got within communication range, we broadcast the standard surrender demand. The translation came through the speakers in perfect galactic standard. By order of the galactic hegemony, you will lay down your weapons and submit to imperial authority. Resistance will result in the destruction of your settlement and the death of your people. Every species had surrendered when they heard that message, Zixthera said. Every single one across 300 worlds. What did the humans do? Mordeth asked. Zixthera was quiet for a long moment. They laughed. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Not all of them, just one. A human soldier standing on their main defensive wall. He was small even for a human. He carried a basic projectile weapon and wore simple armor. But when he heard our surrender demand, he threw back his head and laughed. She demonstrated, making a sound that the translator could not properly convert. Then he spoke. His words were transmitted to every hegemony unit in the landing zone. Zixthera's voice changed, becoming deeper and more confident as she repeated the human's words. You picked the wrong species and you picked the wrong day. We have been preparing for this moment since we learned we were not alone in the universe. You wanted to see what humans can do? You are about to find out. The chamber was dead silent. That was when we learned our first lesson about humans. Zixthera said, they do not surrender. Ever. Not even when surrender is the logical choice. Not even when resistance means death. She looked around the chamber at the assembled leaders. We had 50,000 of the best soldiers in the galaxy. They had 200. The mathematics were simple. The outcome should have been certain. Her 3 eyes seemed to glow with remembered terror. We were wrong about the mathematics. We were wrong about the outcome. We were wrong about everything. The first attack came exactly 1 hour after the surrender demand. Zixthera stood with her regiment at the northern approach, watching the human defensive line through her scope. The small human who had laughed was still visible on the wall. He seemed to be giving orders to other soldiers. Begin bombardment, commanded General Vorthak through the communication system. Standard pacification protocol. Destroy one section of their defensive wall. They will surrender when they see our power. Zixthera had seen this tactic work on dozens of worlds. The hegemony would demonstrate their superior firepower by destroying a small target. Most species would surrender immediately rather than face total destruction. The orbital bombardment began. A single beam of concentrated energy struck the eastern section of the human defensive wall. The beam was precisely calibrated to vaporize exactly 50 meters of fortification without harming the surrounding area. It was meant to be impressive but not devastating. The wall section disappeared in a flash of light and heat. When the smoke cleared, there was a perfect gap in the human defenses. Exactly as planned, Zixthera waited for the surrender signal. On every other world, white flags or their equivalent would appear within minutes. Leaders would emerge to negotiate terms. The show of force always worked, but the humans did something different. They cheered. The sound reached across the battlefield even without amplification. Hundreds of human voices raised in what Zixthera's translator identified as celebration. The humans were not terrified by the orbital bombardment. They were excited by it. Why are they making noise? Asked Sergeant Krelix, one of Zixthera's subordinates. Before she could answer, movement caught her attention. Humans were running toward the gap in their wall, not away from it, toward it. They carried equipment and materials that she did not recognize. "They are repairing the breach," observed Lieutenant Thexara. "Impossible," said Krelix. "The bombardment left fused stone and metal. Nothing can be built there for hours." But the humans were not trying to rebuild the wall. Instead, they were setting up something else in the gap. Within minutes, they had installed what looked like a large weapon platform. It was crude compared to hegemony technology, but it was definitely a weapon. "Sir," called communications specialist Yurton, "the humans are broadcasting again." The same human voice from before came through their communication system. "Thank you for the target practice. We needed to test our new defensive configuration. Please continue the demonstration so we can calibrate our response systems." General Vorthok's voice crackled with anger. "Destroy their northern defensive position. Full power." This time, 3 orbital beams struck simultaneously. The northern wall section where the laughing human had been standing vanished completely. Dust and debris filled the air. When it settled, there was nothing left but a crater. Zixthera felt a moment of satisfaction. The arrogant human was certainly dead now. Perhaps this would finally show them the futility of resistance. The dust continued to clear. Gradually, the bottom of the crater became visible. Movement caught Zixthera's attention. The same human was climbing out of the crater. His armor was scorched and his weapon was gone, but he was alive. Behind him, other humans emerged from what appeared to be an underground bunker. The bombardment had destroyed the surface position, but the humans had been safely underground. "How did they survive direct orbital bombardment?" whispered Thexara. The human who had been laughing looked directly at the hegemony lines. Even at this distance, Zixthera could see that he was smiling. He raised one hand and made a gesture that her translator could not interpret, but the meaning was clear. It was an insult. "All units, advance," ordered General Vorthok. "Close combat. Show them what happens to species that mock the hegemony." Zixthera had participated in 47 military campaigns. She knew how ground assaults were supposed to work. Overwhelming force would advance across the battlefield. The enemy would realize they were outnumbered and surrender, or they would fight briefly before being crushed. 5,000 hegemony soldiers began marching toward the human lines. They moved in perfect formation, weapons ready, showing the discipline that had conquered 300 worlds. The humans watched them come. Zixthera counted approximately 50 human soldiers in the northern section. They stood calmly behind their remaining defenses, apparently unimpressed by the sight of 5,000 advancing warriors. When the hegemony force reached the halfway point, the humans opened fire. Zixthera had expected primitive projectile weapons and basic energy rifles. She had seen the intelligence reports. Human technology was supposed to be centuries behind hegemony standard. The first wave of human fire struck like a natural disaster. Weapons she did not recognize sent streams of metal, projectiles across the battlefield. Each projectile was small, but they came in continuous streams, thousands per second. The sound was like thunder that never stopped, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was the accuracy. Every shot hit exactly where the humans intended. Hegemony soldiers wore advanced armor that could stop most known weapons. The human projectiles went through the armor like it was made of paper. In the first 10 seconds of combat, 300 hegemony soldiers fell. "Impossible," breathed Krelix. "Our armor is rated against Class 7 weapons. How are primitive projectiles penetrating?" Zixthera watched through her scope as human soldiers adjusted their weapons. They were not firing randomly into the hegemony formation. Each human was targeting specific soldiers, hitting weak points in the armor with surgical precision. "They know our equipment," she realized. "They know exactly where to shoot." The hegemony advance continued, but it was no longer organized. Soldiers took cover wherever they could find it. The perfect formation became scattered groups trying to avoid the continuous storm of human fire. "Where are their casualties?" asked Thexara. Zixthera looked at the human positions. Hegemony weapons were striking their defenses continuously, but the humans seemed untouched. Occasionally, a human would duck behind cover when a shot came too close, but none of them appeared to be wounded. "Their defenses are better than our intelligence indicated," she said. It was more than that, though she did not realize it yet. The humans had studied hegemony weapons just as carefully as they had studied hegemony armor. Their defensive positions were designed specifically to stop hegemony energy weapons. The advance reached the human defensive line after 20 minutes of fighting. By that time, the hegemony force had lost over 1,000 soldiers. The humans had lost none. Close combat began when the first hegemony soldiers reached the human trenches. Zixthera expected this phase to go better. Hegemony soldiers were larger and stronger than humans. They had better training and superior weapons. In hand-to-hand combat, they should have overwhelming advantages. The first hegemony soldier to enter a human trench was Warrior Prime Gethuk, a veteran of 30 battles. He was 2 meters tall and weighed twice as much as any human. His personal combat record was flawless. He lasted approximately 3 seconds. The human who killed him was half his size and carried only a simple blade, but the human moved like liquid violence, striking with precision that no training could teach. The blade found the one weak point in Gethuk's armor, sliding between plates to reach vital organs. Gethuk fell, and the human was already moving to the next target. How did that happen? Demanded Krelix. Zixthera watched more hegemony soldiers enter the trenches. Each encounter was the same. Large, strong, well-trained hegemony warriors falling to smaller, lighter humans who fought like they had been born for war. They are faster than our projections indicated, she said, but it was more than speed. The humans moved with absolute confidence, as if they knew exactly what each hegemony soldier would do before the soldier did it. They anticipated attacks, avoided strikes, and responded with lethal precision. "Sir," called Yurton, "General Vorthak is ordering retreat. All units fall back to secondary positions." Zixthera looked at the battlefield. In 1 hour of combat, the hegemony had lost over 2,000 soldiers. The humans had lost fewer than 10. As the hegemony forces withdrew, the humans did something that Zixthera had never seen in any previous campaign. They followed. Small groups of human soldiers emerged from their defensive positions and began pursuing the retreating hegemony forces. They moved quickly and quietly, using the terrain for cover. They struck at struggling units and isolated soldiers, then disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. "They are not supposed to leave their defenses," said Thexara. "No," agreed Zixthera. "They are supposed to stay in their positions and wait for us to attack again." But these humans did not follow the rules that governed normal warfare. They had turned defense into offense, retreat into advance, defeat into victory. As night fell over Kepler 442b, Zixthera realized that everything the hegemony knew about warfare was wrong. The humans had not just defeated a hegemony attack, they had made it look easy. The second day began with what should have been a hegemony advantage. General Vorthak had called for reinforcements during the night. 10,000 additional troops landed before dawn, bringing the total force to 58,000 soldiers. The humans still had fewer than 200. Zixthera studied the updated intelligence reports while her regiment prepared for the day's assault. The humans had used the night to improve their positions, but they had not received any reinforcements. No ships had approached the planet. No additional troops had been detected. "They are alone," said Lieutenant Thexara. "Whatever happens today, they cannot call for help." But Zixthera was beginning to understand that help was not something humans expected. They prepared for situations where help would not come. The morning attack began with a new strategy. Instead of direct assault, the hegemony would use multiple smaller forces to probe human defenses. They would identify weak points and exploit them systematically. Zixthera's regiment was assigned to the eastern approach. Intelligence suggested this was the weakest section of the human defensive line. Only 12 human soldiers had been observed in this area. 12 humans against 5,000 of us, said Sergeant Krelix. "Even if they fight like yesterday, the numbers are impossible." Zixthera was not so confident. The previous day had taught her that human capabilities exceeded all projections. But orders were orders, and the hegemony did not accept defeat from primitive species. The attack began at dawn. Zixthera's regiment advanced carefully, using cover and staying spread out to avoid the devastating concentrated fire they had experienced the day before. The eastern human position appeared to be a simple outpost built around a mining facility. 12 soldiers stood behind basic barriers, watching the approaching hegemony force with the same calm they had shown before. When the distance closed to effective weapons range, the humans opened fire. But this time, something was different. Instead of the continuous storm of projectiles from the previous day, the human fire was more selective. Each shot was aimed at a specific target. Each shot killed or disabled a hegemony soldier. But 12 weapons, no matter how accurate, could not stop 5,000 attackers. The hegemony advance continued. Casualties were heavy but manageable. For every 10 soldiers lost, the force moved closer to the human position. The mathematics were finally working in their favor. That was when Zixithara learned about human psychology. One of the human soldiers, a female carrying a weapon larger than herself, was struck by hegemony fire. The energy beam hit her in the shoulder, spinning her around and knocking her to the ground behind the barriers. Zixithara expected the other humans to continue fighting while their wounded comrade crawled to safety. This was standard military procedure. Individual casualties could not be allowed to compromise unit effectiveness. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The 11 remaining humans stopped shooting at the advancing hegemony force. All of them turned their attention to their wounded comrade. 2 humans dropped their weapons entirely and moved to help her. "They have abandoned their positions," said Krelix excitedly. "They are no longer fighting. We can advance freely." But Zixithara was watching more carefully. The humans had not abandoned their positions. They had changed priorities. The wounded soldier was now more important than the battle. The 2 humans who had dropped their weapons were not soldiers, she realized. They wore different uniforms and carried medical equipment. They were medics, specialists trained to treat wounded personnel. In hegemony doctrine, medics stayed behind the fighting lines. They treated casualties after battles ended. Bringing medical personnel into active combat was considered wasteful and inefficient. These human medics worked directly in the line of fire. One of them, a small male with quick hands, reached the wounded female and began treating her injury. Energy beams from hegemony weapons struck the ground around him, but he did not move. He focused entirely on stopping the bleeding and stabilizing his patient. The other medic, a female with gray hair, returned fire at the hegemony force while simultaneously preparing medical supplies. She was fighting and healing at the same time. "Advance," ordered Zixithara. "They are distracted. We can overrun their position." But as the hegemony force moved closer, the 9 remaining human soldiers began fighting differently. They were no longer simply defending their position. They were defending their wounded comrade. The change was immediately obvious. Human fire became more intense and more accurate. Soldiers who had been careful and methodical became aggressive and relentless. They took risks they had avoided before, exposing themselves to enemy fire in order to get better shots. Within minutes, hegemony casualties doubled. "What happened?" demanded Krelix. "Why are they fighting harder?" Zixithara watched the human medic working on the wounded soldier. The other humans glanced at him frequently, checking his progress. Their entire unit was focused on saving one individual. They are not fighting for territory, she realized. They are fighting for each other. This was a concept that did not exist in hegemony military doctrine. Soldiers fought for victory, for glory, for the expansion of the empire. Individual lives were resources to be spent efficiently in pursuit of larger goals. These humans treated individual lives as the goal itself. The wounded human soldier was back on her feet within minutes. The medic had stopped the bleeding and given her something for the pain. She picked up her weapon and returned to the fighting line, but she was clearly still injured. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side. She could barely hold her weapon steady. Standard military procedure would be to evacuate her to a medical facility where she could recover properly. Keeping a wounded soldier in combat was inefficient and dangerous. Instead, the human unit adjusted their tactics to accommodate her limitations. Soldiers repositioned themselves to cover her weak side. The medics stayed close to provide additional treatment if needed. The entire unit adapted to protect their wounded member, and they fought with even greater intensity than before. "Impossible," said Texara. "They should be weaker with a wounded soldier. Instead, they are stronger." Zixithara was beginning to understand something that hegemony military science had never encountered. Human units did not become weaker when members were wounded. They became more dangerous. The advance stalled as human resistance intensified. What should have been an easy victory was becoming another costly defeat. But orders were orders, and Zixithara continued to push her regiment forward. That was when she made her fatal mistake. During the fighting, a human soldier became separated from his unit. He was young and small even by human standards. He carried a basic rifle and wore simple armor. He posed no significant threat to an entire hegemony regiment. Zixithara ordered a squad to capture him. Prisoners could provide valuable intelligence about human capabilities and weaknesses. It seemed like an easy opportunity. The squad surrounded the isolated human. He was outnumbered 10-1 with no cover and no support. Surrender was his only logical option. Instead, he smiled. "Hello," he said through his communication device. His voice was calm and friendly. "My name is David Chen. I am 19 years old. I have a sister named Lisa and a dog named Rex. I am from a place called Minnesota." Zixthara did not understand why he was providing personal information. Hegemony interrogation protocols did not require such details. "You will surrender your weapon and submit to questioning," announced squad leader Vextal. "I do not think so," said David Chen. "You see, my unit knows where I am. They will come for me." "Your unit is engaged in combat," said Vextal. "They cannot spare soldiers for one individual." David Chen's smile became wider. "You really do not understand humans, do you?" That was when Zixithara learned the most important lesson about human military doctrine. Every human soldier was worth everything. Not just worth saving, worth everything. The entire unit, the entire mission, the entire war if necessary. The sound came first, a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then the ground began to vibrate slightly. "What is that?" asked Krelix. Before anyone could answer, the human reinforcements arrived. They did not come as an organized rescue unit. They came as an avalanche of controlled violence focused on one objective: recovering David Chen. 60 human soldiers struck Zixithara's position from 3 directions simultaneously. They moved with coordination that seemed telepathic, supporting each other with weapons fire while advancing through terrain that should have been impassable. The hegemony squad holding David Chen was eliminated in seconds. The humans extracted their comrade and were gone before Zixithara could organize a response, but they had left behind something more valuable than they took: terror. "They risked 60 soldiers to save one," whispered Thexara. "They abandoned their defensive positions," said Krelix. "They ignored the main battle." Zixthara looked at the smoking crater where squad leader Vextal and his soldiers had been. The humans had used more firepower to rescue one individual than most species use to conquer entire cities. "They do not calculate cost," she said quietly. "When one of them is in danger, the cost does not matter." As the day continued, this pattern repeated. Every time a hegemony unit managed to wound or isolate a human soldier, the response was overwhelming. The third day brought a new strategy born of desperation. General Vorthik had decided that surface combat was impossible. The humans were too well prepared, too accurate with their weapons, and too willing to sacrifice everything for individual soldiers. But every fortress had weaknesses, and intelligence had identified the human tunnel systems. "We will go underground," General Vorthik announced during the morning briefing. "Their mining tunnels cannot be as well defended as their surface positions. We will infiltrate through their own infrastructure and attack from within." Zixthara studied the tunnel maps that intelligence had provided. The human colony was built around extensive mining operations that reached deep into the planet's crust. Hundreds of tunnels connected the surface facilities to underground extraction sites. "The tunnels are narrow," observed Lieutenant Thexara. "We cannot use our heavy weapons or vehicles." "Perfect," said General Vorthak. "Close quarters combat will favor our larger, stronger soldiers. In narrow spaces, human accuracy advantages will be reduced." It seemed logical. Zixithara had fought in tunnel systems before, on worlds where native species tried to hide underground. The hegemony always won these battles because their soldiers were superior in individual combat. The assault began before dawn. 3,000 hegemony soldiers entered the tunnel network from 12 different access points. They moved in small squads using portable lighting and close-range weapons. The tunnels were exactly as intelligence had described. Narrow passages carved through rock, barely wide enough for 3 soldiers to walk side by side. Emergency lighting provided minimal visibility. Support beams and equipment created obstacles and blind corners. For the first hour, the advance went smoothly. Zixithara's squad moved through the eastern tunnel network without encountering any human forces. The tunnels appeared to be abandoned. "Where are the defenders?" asked Sergeant Krelix. "Perhaps they abandoned the underground when they saw our force," suggested Private Yultex. But Zixthara was becoming familiar with human behavior. They did not abandon defensive positions. They adapted them. The first trap activated when her squad reached a junction between 3 tunnels. The floor collapsed, dropping 2 soldiers into a pit filled with sharp metal spikes. They died instantly. "Careful," Zixthera called. "Watch for more traps," but there were not just more traps. There was an entire system of them. Every junction had a different hazard. Some floors collapsed. Some walls closed together. Some tunnels filled with poisonous gas. Others flooded with burning liquid. The humans had turned their own mining infrastructure into a weapon. "How did they build all this?" demanded Krelix. Zixthera examined the trap mechanism nearest to their position. The device was clearly built from mining equipment, but it had been modified with additional components. The workmanship was precise and professional. They did not build it after we arrived, she realized. This was already here. Impossible. Our intelligence showed simple mining tunnels. Our intelligence was wrong. The truth was becoming clear as they moved deeper into the system. The humans had not built a mining operation and then added defenses. They had built a fortress and disguised it as a mining operation. Every tunnel was designed for defense. Every chamber could become a strong point. Every passage had multiple routes and hidden connections. The humans had been preparing for this war before they even knew aliens existed, squad leader called. Communications specialist Hercule. "I am receiving reports from other units. Heavy casualties in all tunnel sections." "What kind of casualties?" "Traps, ambushes, and other things." "What other things?" Hercule's voice was uncertain. "The reports are unclear. Something about humans appearing and disappearing. Attacks from impossible directions." Zixthera's squad continued deeper into the tunnel system. They moved more carefully now, checking every surface for trap triggers. The advance slowed to a crawl. That was when she encountered her first tunnel fighter. The attack came from above. A section of tunnel ceiling opened silently, and a human soldier dropped into the middle of their formation. He landed without making a sound, struck 3 soldiers with a blade faster than Zixthera could follow, then disappeared through another opening in the floor. The entire encounter lasted less than 5 seconds. "Where did he go?" shouted Krelix. Zixthera looked at the ceiling opening. It was perfectly concealed when closed. She examined the floor opening. It led to another tunnel that their maps did not show. "There are passages we cannot see," she said. More attacks followed. Human soldiers appeared from hidden openings, struck quickly, and vanished before return fire could be directed at them. They used the tunnel system like a 3-dimensional maze, moving through spaces that hegemony forces could not access. "How many tunnels are there?" asked Private Yultex. Zixthera checked their position against the intelligence maps. According to the data, they were in a simple straight passage connecting 2 mining chambers, but she could see at least 6 different openings that led to unknown areas. "More than our intelligence indicated," she said. That was the problem with fighting humans. She was learning. Their intelligence was always incomplete. Every time the hegemony thought they understood human capabilities, new surprises emerged. The worst surprise came when her squad reached what appeared to be an abandoned mining chamber. The room was large enough for proper combat, with good sight lines and multiple exit routes. Finally, they could use their superior training and equipment advantages. A human soldier stepped out of the shadows at the far end of the chamber. She was small, even by human standards. Female, young, carrying a basic weapon. She wore mining clothes instead of military armor. She looked like a civilian who had picked up a rifle. "Surrender," called Zixthera. "You are outnumbered and surrounded." The human smiled. "Am I?" That was when Zixthera noticed the walls. What she had taken for mining equipment and support structures were actually weapon platforms. Dozens of automated guns emerged from hidden compartments, all aimed at her squad's position. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the human civilians. They emerged from concealed positions throughout the chamber. Men, women, elderly individuals, even adolescents. All of them armed. All of them moving with the same deadly precision she had seen in the human soldiers. "Civilians are not supposed to fight," said Krelix. "Human civilians are different," said the young woman. "We have been practicing." Zixthera looked around the chamber. At least 40 humans surrounded her squad of 12 soldiers, but these were not professional military personnel. They were farmers, miners, engineers, teachers. "How long have you been practicing?" she asked. "Since we learned that aliens existed," the woman replied. "Every human settlement has been preparing for this day. We knew someone would eventually try to conquer us." The implications were staggering. The human military was not just 200 soldiers on this colony. It was every human who could hold a weapon. You cannot train civilians to fight. Professional soldiers, said Zixathara. Watch us, said the woman. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Zixathara's experience. The human civilians fought with coordination that matched the best military units she had encountered. They used the chamber like a weapon, turning every surface and obstacle into an advantage. But more than their tactics, it was their attitude that disturbed her. They were not afraid. They were not angry. They were focused, like individuals performing a job they had trained for extensively, and they were very good at their job. Zixathara's squad lasted approximately 8 minutes. At the end, only she and Krelix remained alive, and both of them were wounded. Surrender, said the young woman. We need to ask you some questions. As hegemony soldiers, they were trained never to surrender. Capture meant interrogation, and interrogation meant revealing military secrets. But Zixathara was curious about something more important than military protocols. Why do you fight? She asked. You could have evacuated. You could have hidden. You could have run to another world. The woman looked puzzled, as if the question made no sense. This is our home, she said. These are our families. Where would we run to? Anywhere. The galaxy is vast. You could have found another planet and abandoned this one to you? The woman shook her head. That is not how humans work. You are willing to die for dirt and rocks? We are willing to die for the idea that no one has the right to take our home away from us. Zixathara did not understand. In hegemony culture, territory was a resource. If superior force demanded it, the logical response was to find other territory. But humans did not think like that. They treated their homes as extensions of themselves. Taking a human's home was like trying to take their identity, and humans would die before they gave up their identity. You cannot win, said Zixathara. We have 50,000 soldiers. Had, corrected the woman. According to our communications intercepts, you have about 30,000 left. The number was approximately correct. 2 days of fighting had cost the hegemony 20,000 casualties. Reinforcements will come, said Zixathara. Probably, agreed the woman. And we will kill them too. How many humans are there? The woman smiled. In this colony? 8,000. On all human worlds? About 12 billion. 12 billion civilians trained for war. 12 billion humans who will not surrender their homes. The final day began with complete chaos. General Vorthak was dead, killed during a night raid that had penetrated the hegemony command center. Colonel Thexron had taken command, but half the communication network was down. Nobody knew exactly how many soldiers remained operational. Zixathara sat in a human detention area, watching her captors prepare for what they called the final phase. The young woman who had captured her was named Sarah Chen. She was a mining engineer, not a soldier, but she commanded the civilian defense forces with professional competence. Your people are planning something desperate, Sarah said as she checked Zixathara's restraints. We intercepted communications about a final assault. They will use orbital bombardment, Zixathara said. Complete destruction of the colony from space. Probably, Sarah agreed. That is why we are leaving. Zixathara looked around the chamber. Human civilians were packing equipment and supplies with efficient speed. Children helped elderly individuals walk. Adults carried wounded soldiers. Everything was organized and calm. You are evacuating? Yes, the civilian population will be off-planet within 6 hours. What about your soldiers? Sarah's expression became sad. They will stay to ensure the evacuation succeeds. How many soldiers? 12. Zixathara stared at her. 12 soldiers against 30,000 hegemony troops? The numbers do not matter anymore, Sarah said. The mission is evacuation, not victory.